One Piece manga, chapter 1100, titled, Thank You, Bonnie. I'd prepare for some tissues, as this chapter has so much feels. The chapter begins with Kizaru arriving at Egghead Island and inside Dr. Vegapunk's new lab. He tells Dr. Vegapunk that he's here on business as he was dispatched by Saturn. He says, "I'm afraid I'm here on business. Man, it's cold. This place sure is a far cry from Punk Hazard." This is interesting, as we all know that half of Punk Hazard looks like it was from the Ice Age. Dr. Vegapunk tells him that this lab will be the future, and his head is overflowing with so many ideas that it's honestly hard to think straight. Kizaru then realizes that was why Vegapunk hadn't noticed the world's government's hidden Den Mushi that was spying on him and eavesdropping on his conversation with KUMA. Kizaru told Vegapunk that he should have been more cautious and checked every corner of the lab when he had moved in. Dr. Vegapunk could only sigh. Kizaru then says, "The government frowns on secret backroom deals with pirates, you know." Vegapunk has no comeback. He admitted, Okay, you got me, Kizaru." Kizaru feels bad and says that he hates it when Vegapunk gets like this, and that he can't do anything about it as he is just doing his job. The scene quickly shifts to the coast of Egghead Island, where a bunch of Marines are including ex-Drake. They are there to ensure that the situation remains under control. Though I personally don't think they would be able to control the situation if KUMA decides to go on a rampage. The scene shifts back to the room, this time with KUMA in the room along with Saturn's Den Mushi. Dr. Vegapunk talks with Saturn. Saturn tells Vegapunk that it's irrelevant whether he considers KUMA an ideal candidate. He adds that whether it was his ignorance or that he doesn't care, KUMA is a pirate that has a bounty of 296 million berries. Making a pirate the face of their clone program is simply unacceptable, as it would destroy the reputation of the Marines. As such, Saturn decides to negotiate with KUMA by adding his own set of conditions. We saw in the last chapter where Saturn thinks Vegapunk is a fool for not making the most of this chance, and that he has his own ideas. This set of conditions shows the ideas that Saturn has to make the most of this chance. The first condition is for KUMA to agree to become one of the 7 warlords of the sea. The world government found themselves a member short thanks to the exploits of a rookie named Ace a few days ago. This managed to cause quite a bit of stir in the pirate world. Someone as strong as KUMA would be a natural choice to fill that open position and bring order to the seas. The second condition is for KUMA to undergo procedures to become a human weapon for the Navy. KUMA asks Saturn if he is talking about modifying his body. Saturn confirms this and says, "You already have all the traits required to be an effective warlord. After you receive your enhancements, you will become the paragon of fear for the pirate scum far and wide." Dr. Vegapunk is seen speechless. Kizaru agrees with Saturn and says that the Marines would love to have KUMA on their side. Dr. Vegapunk is angry and tells Kizaru to shut it. Saturn continues. He tells KUMA that he isn't like other pirates and that they are well aware of his history with the Revolutionary Army. If KUMA accepts their offer, the world government must take precautions to ensure he never uses his power against them. This is the foundation of their third and final condition. Saturn's face grew dark with apathy and says, "You must agree to give up your free will and sense of individuality." Upon hearing that, Dr. Vegapunk is outraged and yells that it would be likened to killing him. Vegapunk asks if this condition was set because none of the other warlords follow orders and go about doing whatever they want. He exclaims, "If you snuff out all the humanity left in a cyborg, you'll have nothing but a robot. Do you really expect me to murder a man?" Saturn then reminds Vegapunk of his position and says, "You forget yourself. You're a military scientist and you have no right to talk back." He adds that these conditions must be met if this criminal wishes to save his daughter. He reminds KUMA that it's a small price to pay considering how expensive and difficult this procedure would be otherwise, and that he has no obligation to help this girl. KUMA puts his hands over his face as he tries to hold back his tears over his fate. Vegapunk continues in protest, saying, "This is murder. It'd be perverse to modify a human like that." He was immediately interrupted by KUMA as he requested for Vegapunk to do it. As KUMA continues to cover his face with his hands, he says, "I've been worrying all this time, thinking it might be impossible to save Bonnie. Dr. Vegapunk was left stunned as he could not believe what he was seeing. KUMA wasn't worried about himself at all. He was crying in tears of joy and gratitude. "I'm so grateful. I'll happily accept any fate so long as Bonnie is cured," he says. Tears began to fall from Vegapunk's eyes as he was touched by KUMA's love for his daughter. Kizaru lowered his hat a bit with respect for KUMA, and Saturn continues to remain apathetic. The scene quickly shifts elsewhere in the lab where Bonnie is seen running and playing with Sentomaru, being completely unaware of what just transpired. Saturn asks Vegapunk how long it would take to finish KUMA's enhancements and cure Bonnie's disease. Vegapunk replies that it will take a total of 1.5 years before Bonnie's disease is cured. It would take 6 months to deal with the sapphire scales and another year before she can be exposed to natural light. As for KUMA's enhancements, it would take at least 2 years. KUMA was so relieved and says, "Thank goodness. She really will be all better by the time she is 10. Saturn, still being focused on the deal, wanted more insurance. He says, "How can we trust you to remain obedient after she's cured? Your daughter is our only leverage here." KUMA adds that he has no intention of running. Saturn retorts that regardless of whether he intends to run or not, the world government will have to take custody of her once her treatment is completed. She would only be free after KUMA follows through with the erasure of his personality. Seriously, I can't wait for the day that Luffy kicks his ass, and I hope that it comes real soon. Vegapunk is outraged yet again and yells, "But that would mean KUMA won't get to see Bonnie after she's cured." Saturn, being completely unconcerned, affirms what Vegapunk had said. He says that his modifications will commence immediately and that it will be an ongoing process as he performs his duties as a warlord and helps the government to control the seas. He adds that after Bonnie is cured, there will be no further contact between them to ensure they do not escape. Saturn then warns that if there is any hint of defiance from any of them, Saturn guarantees that Bonnie will spend the rest of her life as a slave. KUMA is shocked as his fate just got even worse, but he assures and swears to Saturn that he won't try to see her. "I only have one request," KUMA says. "Don't tell Bonnie the truth. She can't know about her illness or that she is being kept as a hostage." KUMA continues with his request, saying that he does not want her to wake up after her surgery in some lifeless government facility. He requested for her to be taken back to Sorbet, kept in the church where she grew up. He promises Saturn that if he could grant him that one request, he won't seek her out and will obey the world government without question. Saturn contemplates for a moment and says, "Very well." He adds that it makes no difference where she's kept, as long as the government oversees it, and that the next 2 years will be interesting for them. KUMA sees Bonnie and tells her that they will be staying in Egghead Island for the next 6 months. Bonnie is excited that she gets to stay with her father as he lies to her that they need to run some tests on him, as they think he might have come down with something. Just being with her father was enough to make Bonnie happy. Bonnie introduces Sentomaru to KUMA and calls him a weirdo, and Sentomaru was not too fond of that. As Bonnie was out running around and playing earlier, she shared with KUMA that the lab has so many windowless rooms. Vegapunk warns Bonnie to be careful as there are all sorts of dangerous gadgets around the lab. After all the preparations are made, Vegapunk yells, "That's it! I can create the weapon of my dreams now. Someone needs to write everything I'm thinking down. Damn it! The brainwaves won't stop. If only they could eat and use the toilet for me too. I'd never have to stop." Vegapunk was getting annoyed by how short-handed he was, and another eureka moment came to him. "This is going to keep me as busy as a beaver," Vegapunk says. "I wish there were 5 more of me." Of course, this eventually inspired him to create the Vegapunk satellites. As time passed, KUMA received his modifications, and Bonnie received her treatment. During that time, they had gotten close to Dr. Vegapunk, Sentomaru, and Kizaru. They all enjoyed a huge pizza together and were really happy with each other. Shortly after, they had everyone dancing to the drums of liberation, which is the biggest shock of this chapter. 6 months had passed, and after looking at Bonnie's results, Dr. Vegapunk says that she will be completely cured after a year of rehabilitation. KUMA thanked Vegapunk for the success of her surgery. Bonnie thanked Vegapunk and asked if she could visit once she is better, and Vegapunk said, "Of course." KUMA and Bonnie returned to Sorbet Kingdom with everyone excited to see them again after so long. Bonnie proudly says that she will be better in a year and that she will finally be able to go outside. The citizens there were happy to hear the fantastic news, as Bonnie had always said that she would be fit as a fiddle by the time she turned 10. An old lady enters the church and asks, "Does this mean I'll be taking care of you again, Bonnie?" Bonnie was so happy to see her again after so long and yelled, "Granny Connie!" Connie assures KUMA that they would be more than happy to take care of Bonnie. KUMA thanks them and says that he won't be able to stay as he is still a pirate after all, and that it wouldn't be good for the kingdom. He carries Bonnie and tells her that he doesn't think he will be back for at least a year. Bonnie was shocked by how long he will be gone for, but KUMA promises her that he will write a bunch of letters to her. Bonnie says, "Okay, the next I see you, we'll both be able to sail the seas and reach the horizon." KUMA says, "I can't wait." Bonnie continues in excitement, "I want to travel to all sorts of places together." KUMA says, "I'd love to take you," as he thinks that he would have loved that, as it's no longer a possibility. Shortly after, someone enters the church and says, "Please leave the rest to us, KUMA's son." She is none other than Cipher Pole number 8 intelligence agent Alpha. She introduces herself to everyone as Bonnie's nurse. She says, "The doctor ordered me to take care of Bonnie Chan during her recovery. I'll check her temperature daily, make sure she takes her medicine, and monitor for any changes." She approaches Bonnie and says, "My name is Alpha. Nice to meet you, Bonnie Chan." Shortly after, a gate and a checkpoint was created. Alpha says, "No suspicious individuals will be allowed near her during recovery. Please remember to bring identification with you if you plan on visiting." Someone says that's such a pain and asks what's the building she's putting up in front of the church. Alpha tells them that it's their accommodations. Alpha pulls something out in front of KUMA and reminds him what will happen if he does not honor the deal made with Saturn. KUMA understands and affirms that he isn't coming back. KUMA places his hand on Bonnie's head and thanks her with a smile and says, "I'm so glad you were born." As he walks out of the church, the citizens and Bonnie happily send him off. As the days go by, news of KUMA being one of the 7 warlords begins to spread. The pirates of the world were utterly shocked. Sugar says, "Young master, there's a new warlord." Doflamingo sees the news and says, "KUMA, the tyrant? Sounds like another villain has come into play," and laughs. Robin reads the article and asks Crocodile for what he thinks, but he couldn't care less. Instead, he asks Robin if she has taken care of those people who spotted their rain-making ship. Mihawk remains unnerved as he sees the news. Alvida says he looks as big as Whitebeard and asks Kobe who he thinks is stronger. Kobe, being afraid as always, says she is stronger than KUMA. On Moby Dick, the Whitebeard pirates are seen reading the news as well. Ace says, "So they finally found a replacement? That's great news, Jinbei." Jinbei says that considering the circumstances, Ace was the last person he'd expect to say that, especially since Ace rejected the offer to become a warlord. Jinbei was surprised to read that he's a former king and that the pirate world is changing. Boa Hancock says that the news doesn't affect the Kuja pirates as she follows no man's orders, but Gloriosa reminds her that it's essential that she keeps track of information like this. Gecko Moria reacts to the news by laughing and says, "They say he's a paw-palmed man. That doesn't exactly sound frightening, does it?" Perona tells Moria that he's already a warlord, so he's got to be strong enough to make the cut. Dragon sees the news but remains quiet. Sabo and Koala were shocked. "Don't the warlords answer directly to the government?" Sabo asks. "Kuma-san would never work for them," Koala says. The scene shifts to Kuma's ship. He begins writing his letter to Bonnie. "Dear Bonnie, I'm still at sea as I write this. I've become quite well known and it's getting harder and harder to sail in peace, but I'm doing okay. I'm doing my best to find interesting travel destinations for you when you turn 10. He tells the Cocoa Bird that it will be a long journey to deliver the letter and to take care. As Kuma states into the sky, he hopes that everyone back in Sorbet is doing as well as he is. The scene shifts to Luffy in his village without his brothers as he is training. Luffy laughs and says, "I made him mad." The scene shifts back to Kuma's ship. Kuma receives new commands from the world government. He was in East Blue and asked what his orders were as he was seen just outside of Fusha village. And the chapter ends with yet another cliffhanger. Considering how Luffy did not know of KUMA until they had arrived in Sabaody, why do you think KUMA is at Fusha Village, and what do you think his orders were? Please comment down below, as I'd love to hear your thoughts and opinions. If you enjoy this video, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel. It helps motivate me to create more One Piece content like this for you. Till then, I will see you in the next chapter. Thank you.